Akua and I actually met via Akua was interning at a brand that I was working for at the time, and we've kind of just stayed in touch. We're both like fashion obsessed girls who've worked
Same.
in the world of fashion. Akua is actually finishing up college during a pandemic, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. We'll see if I finish. I'm kidding. I know I will finish, but I'm just distracted a lot of
And
the
tell the
time.
people what you're studying right now.
So I'm studying fashion design management at Cornell University, Big Red.
Is
Yeah,
that a
I'm
thing?
looking
Is that
forward
like
to
your
done.
big red?
Yeah,
Is that
that's our sports name, I think. Big Red.
ooh?
Go Big Red.
Clearly, I did not go to a college with any sports teams. I studied fashion merchandising at LIM College, which is all fashion all the time. Our
Lucky.
version of a football game was the annual drag show.
I'm dead.
That just gives you some insight as to what I experienced. Yeah, so graduated college and from there bounced around, worked a lot in the wholesale space, specifically for trade shows, specifically for swim and resort, luxury in that space. Really, really exciting time. Went from that to freelancing, doing some production work, some editorial work, and then I worked for a fashion tech startup running all of their customer service. So I've kind of touched all spaces. And during that time, I worked on this little baby that I call Brainwash. So if you're not familiar, Brainwash is a digital media space for Black and Brown youth. Initially, it started off just being editorial content that I was writing during college. So I would literally be like in a marketing class and hop out and write a review about lemonade because I just didn't have any time to do anything else any other time. Um, and from there, it sort of blossomed into a network of cool kids who do cool things and write about cool things. So I have an amazing team of writers and editors and just really creative thought leaders that all happen to be Black and Brown, which is where my heart lies, of course. And we kind of talk about fashion, Akua and I, like all the time, every day.
Nonstop.
We kind of live, breathe, eat, sleep it. Our whole team actually does. Most of our meetings end up being fashion focused just because we can't stop. And we recognize that there really isn't a space for Black girls specifically to talk about
Yeah.
fashion in a real way. That's not like, oh my God, do you like my Chanel bag? Like, oh my
Mhm.
God, Saint Laurent. Like, that feels very inauthentic to what real fashion girls talk about. So we're using this space to talk about things that are happening in the industry,
Yeah.
brands that we're really interested in, things that we predict will happen in the next 6, 8, 12 months, et cetera, et cetera. So we hope that you guys stay locked in. And Akua, do you have anything else to say? I'm being greedy.
Um, no, I think what Ayanna said is really true. I think the kind of idea was suggested by a mutual friend of ours who thought that our conversation we had a conversation on live and it just happened to include a lot of fashion stuff. And so it's really exciting because I've loved podcasts and I love fashion and I love getting to talk about fashion. And so it's nice to find a platform where there are people who will listen because I think my
Yeah.
friends are a little bit tired of
They're tired. They're
hearing
just like,
about
girl, we
it.
don't care, fam. Like,
Like
we
we don't know
don't
any, and
care.
I'm like, well, you know, this happened, right? And they're like, no, I have no idea what that even
Actually,
means.
I have
So
no idea.
it's exciting. I'm really excited.
So we hope that you guys again stay locked in, and as we continue to grow and learn, we're going to get better and better and better at this. So if you hear a lot of like allow me, like just relax, just cool out. Okay? If you hear a little static, just relax. It's okay. Just calm down. It's a pandemic. Cut us some slack.
Sure, cut us some slack.
So let's talk about what's happening in the world of fashion, shall
Of
we,
course.
darling?
Yes, ma'am.
So, some news that happened, I think about a month ago, is the creative director of Givenchy. Her name is Claire White Keller. She actually departed. So, Givenchy currently doesn't have a creative director. Um, I don't really care about Givenchy. Like, I was never that girl at all, like ever. Ricardo Tisci definitely did something for the brand that I don't think this young woman, clearly I don't even know who she is for real, for
Mhm.
real.
Yeah,
Um, she wasn't putting niggas in Rottweiler t-shirts. So
that's true.
I don't
That's
have I
true.
have nothing to say about that. It'll be interesting to see what a big fashion house does without a creative director during a pandemic.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I don't really care about this. Do
And
you?
I'm curious to see. I'm just curious to see who's next because I feel like a lot of the fashion
The girls
brands
are
that you hear
fleeing.
about, yeah, exactly, and a lot of them are just kind of not passing around fashion directors, but like it was Raf Simons at Calvin Klein, and then he left, and now
Which
there are
I
talks
didn't
about.
understand why
Me
they thought
neither.
that
I thought he was
worked.
doing a really good job. I really, I kind of like.
No.
I like the diffusion kind of 305 West,
Yeah.
that part. I like that part, which
I
that
think
part made
Raf
sense to me.
Simons as a designer is just too cool for
That's true.
an all
Okay.
American
Yeah,
Calvin
very true.
Klein brand. But like
Yeah.
I'm living. I don't know that
Yeah.
middle
Yeah. Yeah.
America
Yeah.
is
Very
necessarily
true.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, I want to wear
Yeah.
Raf Simons
That's
design.
true. Middle America. Yeah.
And I
But yeah, I'm curious to see
like
who's next. Just
I think
where
that
they pick from.
culture of creative directors is hard for a lot of these designers because you have to put out so many collections. I think Alexander McQueen talked about it when he was at, oh my god, where was he at?
That's
Givenchy.
interesting. Yeah, he was.
Interesting. Okay, okay, okay. I thought it was
Yeah.
Louis. But yeah, while he was sort of at the height of his personal brand, Givenchy obviously was like, yo, come design for
Mm-hmm.
us because we want to sell things too. But to his point in the doc, like it's very hard to keep up with that cycle of like, yo, like I can't come up with that many ideas every single
Yeah.
day. Like that's not realistic. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Givenchy. Again, if niggas is not putting me in Rottweiler tees, I don't
I don't
care.
want
I don't
it.
want it. Next up, which is the fashion girls are fighting, honey. Former editor at large of Vogue, Andre Leon Talley. If you're not familiar with the caftan wearing man, you I don't
You need to be.
I don't I don't know what to tell you. He was set to release his memoir, The Chiffon Trenches, sometime in September, I believe. And some quotes from his memoir actually got leaked on the internet, and a lot of it was centered on Miss Anna Wintour and how she's not capable of simple human kindness, which I think is like such an absurd statement to make, but I kind of live.
Mhm.
What?
He's always been so dramatic. I love how his flair for like, just
Everything
extravagance.
is
I love
is
it.
is extra with
Yeah.
Andre, and I'm obsessed. He said that his relationship with Anna Wintour left him with huge emotional and psychological scars, which I think is such a profound statement to make. And I think a lot of Black people, specifically within the fashion space, have sort of this like, you end up being a puppet, for lack of a better term, for a lot of these big brands and big guards as he speaks. He also spoke about how he got replaced on the Met steps and found out in the most random, like no one came up to him on some like, yo, Andre, like we love you. We just want to take a different direction this
Mm-hmm.
go around. No one said that. And it ended up being Liza or Lisa, I think it's Liza
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Koshy from YouTube, which like I just
Yeah.
I don't you don't have any frame of reference to say like
Yeah.
this is a good garment. This is a bad
Mm-hmm.
garment. This gown is fab. This tux is boring. Like you don't have anything to base that off of.
Mm-hmm. And I
So I
think
think
especially for an event as high fashion as the Met Gala red carpet, it makes even less sense because I can understand maybe like
just
this
like
is
a
more
regular
shaped to
red
like the next
carpet.
new fashion, exactly, or like to like a reality show where people are upcoming designers because like a next fashion or like a product runway. But this is the Met Gala. This happens once a year.
It's the
This is
Super
like
Bowl.
the fashion girl Super Bowl, exactly, or the fashion person Super Bowl. Let me say. And so to put someone there who doesn't really understand maybe what it means or understand, I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
tough.
I think like I would be so offended if I was
Oh, for sure.
at Vogue for years and years and years and they just replaced me with a YouTube girl. But I
Yeah.
can kind of understand from Vogue's perspective why they did that, right?
Mhm.
Their interviews on the carpet are being posted on their YouTube channel.
Yep. And they're
So
trying
they
to
want to
break into
do
YouTube very
everything
quickly. Yeah.
exactly. They want to do anything and everything they can to break into that YouTube space. And what better way to get non fashion people to click on a video than to put like one of YouTube's biggest players?
Yeah.
They could have still done that, but still had Andre there to help.
True.
I think
That's
that would
true.
have been cool. That
Conversation.
would have
Yeah.
been a nice moderate space. So I'm excited to get my book, honey, because I'm definitely getting it. It's set
Pre-order.
now to release on May 19th. And yeah, the girls are fighting and
Yeah.
I'm living.
So the next thing that really excited me, and as soon as I saw it, I sent it to Ayanna, was Saint Laurent voluntarily removing itself from the preset fashion schedule. They said for the rest of the year, for 2020, they're not going to show at any of the preset dates, and they realized that it's an important decision, and it's based on what's happening now and based on their status as a trailblazer. YSL, I think, was the first house to do ready to wear because
Yes.
they wanted to connect with people who were, the real customers. And so I think it's true to their brand, and I'm excited because Ayanna and I had been talking about doing this podcast with this theme for a long time, and this just makes so much sense for them. It aligns perfectly with what we were thinking about. I'm not sure if it's going to make sense for them. I can't predict that, but I think
Right.
for them to make a decision, I think because a lot of people are floundering in uncertainty, so for them to stand up and make a decision as a big fashion house, of their stature,
It's
I think is
great. And
really
I think
cool.
we're gonna
Yeah,
see like a trickle effect happen, right? Because I think
exactly,
a lot of these brands sort of wait for these key big fashion houses to make a stance in order for them to
exactly.
move.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know that I'm in a space to say, fashion cannot move unless the entire collective moves at once.
Exactly. That's
It
that's
can't
the
sort of
thing.
like
Everyone needs to
move.
decide. Yeah.
Exactly. If you're going to be in the machine, if you want to
Mhm.
exist outside of the machine, you can do that, but you have to recognize you're not going to have the same access, the same resources as
Exactly.
folks that are
Same
within the
support.
machine.
Yeah.
But if you're going to exist in the machine, to Akuya's point, right? Like you got to play the game. You got to
Hmm.
do the thing. And if you're going to do the thing, you have to do it together. So
Yeah.
I definitely think as a result, we're going to see a lot of big fashion house brands move towards like removing themselves from the
Hmm.
calendar because it's not necessary. And if you thought as a big brand in 2020 during a pandemic, you're going to produce a show that people
Yeah.
care about
And
and
we
that
are
people
gonna
feel
watch.
safe to even
Exactly.
go to,
Yeah.
you're absurd.
Yeah. For sure.
Such a waste of your resources. You can be spending your money, your time, and your energy on your supply chain, which, if you're not a direct to consumer brand, is likely where you're being hit the
Hmm.
hardest.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a huge, huge move.
I'm
I'm so
excited. I'm
yeah.
excited.
Yeah. It makes me happy.
I'm super excited for that. So today we're going to be focusing, obviously, our conversation around COVID and its impact on the fashion industry. I mean, it's a global pandemic, so it's going to hit naturally every single industry. I think that fashion in particular has been an industry that hasn't moved or changed overall in such a long, 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 long time
Yep.
that this was sort of long overdue, right? Like, as a fashion person, I'm excited. I'm not excited about the pandemic, right? Because there are
Hmm.
actual people that are dying, specifically
Hmm.
Black people that are dying and not getting
Hmm.
access. But I am excited to know that this is going to galvanize some change within an industry that should have changed years and years ago.
Exactly.
So, for folks that aren't privy to what the buy calendar looks like and how product gets from ideation to on a consumer's body, what happens is we have what we call a buy calendar, and this is how buyers place orders for their next season, and those orders end up in stores. So let me give some context here. So normally fashion weeks happen twice a year. Big fashion weeks happen twice a year. You have your fall winter shows that happen in February, and you have your spring summer shows that happen in September. So what happens is a brand will show their collection in February, and they have exactly 5 months to produce those collections and have those collections delivered to their particular retailers. So that you can imagine doesn't make sense for the consumer, right? Because if I'm a brand and I'm showing my collection to all my buyers and my press in February to then be in stores by July, that doesn't make sense because the consumer is not buying fall winter fashion until it's cold outside. I'm not walking into a store and seeing winter coats in July, August and being like, okay, cool. Like, I'm going to buy this coat. I'm going to be like, I'm going to wait until it's actually cold outside to the
Hmm.
very last minute before I buy this thing because I'm still in
And when
summer
it's going to be
mode
on sale. Yeah, exactly.
and when it's going to be on sale. So for the retailer, it's kind of frustrating, right? Because now I have garments on my sales floor that are just taking up space that can't even be sold right now. And I'm probably likely going to have to place them on a markdown until the weather eases up and people are ready to buy. But no one thought to make any changes to this calendar. It just sort of stayed as it is. And because of COVID, right, we saw the big outbreak happen and the sort of shelters in place happen right after Fashion Month. So
Hmm.
after Paris, Milan, New York, all of the major cities that had their fashion weeks happened. So brands were either mid production or getting ready to start production. So they either had to go back to their factories and say, look, like we can't pay you for the product that we were going to produce. Like, stop everything now. Don't even start.
Yeah.
Or they're like, hey, I know you started to produce half of our collection, which, like, thanks. Give me the collection. I'll pay you for that. But
Yeah. But
that's
no
it.
more. Yeah.
Which sucks, unfortunately, for these factories that are in places like Bangladesh and China and Vietnam. They now have product sitting in their factories that they can't sell.
Yeah.
But from the brand perspective, I just produced garments that I can't sell. And also, I had orders placed from these big retailers that these retailers are coming back and saying, like, look, we can't even fulfill these orders. We don't even know what the state of the world is looking like.
Yeah.
So now you have to figure out, okay, what a lot of brands do is they use the monies that they get from these buys to funnel into their production costs. So I'm expecting that I'm going to get my money back from producing this line from the money I got from these retailers. But now these
Hmm.
retailers are not going to pay me. So where do I stand? It's unfortunate for everyone involved. I think production is going to get hit the hardest, right? These factories, because even once folks are allowed to go outside, factories, especially ones that, if we're being honest, that produce garments for fast fashion retailers and some of these like small specialty stores,
Hmm.
they don't have the space to have 6 feet in between two workers. Like that's
Yeah.
not going to work. So
Hmm.
they're going to have to reconfigure their entire factory. For the retailer, they're now, if you think about it, stores that have been closed since February have products sitting on their floor that
Exactly.
once this opens up, unless they've been going into their store and like funneling some of those product from physical
Hmm.
stores into their e-com, they're just gonna have to take all that stuff out, pull it off the
Yeah.
floor immediately, and start pushing new merchandise. That
Yeah.
I don't know how that's gonna work. They're gonna have a lot of markdowns for
Hmm.
sure. Another major sector that's gonna get hit is resort. So if you're not familiar with resort, think swim, think caftans, think things that you would wear on the beach in the middle of winter, right? So resort happens June through August. That's when resort brands are showing their collections, usually at the top of June. True swim brands are showing during swim week, which happens in July, but most of the buy that these buyers from these big retailers are doing happens in June, and then product ends in their store in November during
Yeah.
like holiday season where people are like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I'm going to St. Bart's. I need like a new like Zimmerman swimsuit,
Yeah.
whatever. But they completely removed resort out of the calendar because you can't have any shows, you can't have any presentations. So a lot of these resort brands, which are smaller brands, unless they're big brands like a Michael Kors who has ready to wear
Mm-hmm.
and then resort built in,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to have to figure out a way to digitize their entire wholesale process so that they can still reach out to buyers because stores are going to need product in November. They're going to need resort
Yeah.
collections in their stores in November, but they're not going to be able to physically go to a showroom or to a trade show or to a runway and say, look, I want X amount of units of this and that. So it will be interesting to see what resort wear brands particularly do. Hopefully they hire a solid team that can perhaps take their line sheets and put them on services like Jor where buyers can go in and be like, okay, I want to put an order for this, this, and this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's unfortunate if they've started to produce any of these goods or started to produce the fashion shows and the runway shows and things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
I also
especially, oh, sorry, I don't want to cut you off. I think especially to your point about um, needing to have stuff on the shelves in October and November, resort stuff, especially if things start to open up back then and people do want to make travel plans. You know, maybe it's
yeah,
people who are coming out of, you know, being locked down and now like, okay, first thing I want to do is, you know, go somewhere
is be
new.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It's interesting. I think the supply chain is a part of fashion that really like intrigues me because it's such a domino effect, right? Because now I'm thinking
mm-hmm.
like, okay, for brands that rely on production in China, what are they going to do? Are they going to have to move their production from China to places like America, which we don't
Yeah,
really have the
we don't.
infrastructure
Yeah.
for production in that way? I read in Vogue that Michael Kors, who produces a lot of his goods in Italy because of the leather, is now
Mm-hmm.
having to pull his production from Italy to the US. Again, we don't have
Mm-hmm.
access
Yeah.
to these specific folks who have expertise on how to work with leather in the way that folks in Italy do, but
Mm-hmm.
Italy has been hit the hardest
Really,
from
really
this
hard.
virus. There are people who are,
Yeah.
besides America, because we're
I was about
dumb,
to say, yeah.
yeah, like whatever. Always America is number one in stupidity, then everyone else kind of follows. But yeah, so brands who rely on like leather from Italy, what are they going to do? Are they going to now have to move from natural leathers and natural fibers to something
Mm-hmm.
more synthetic that they can have
Mm-hmm. PVU.
control over? I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know. What do you think about the whole the buy calendar and the supply chain and what's going to happen moving forward?
I think I know that with regards to supply chain, specifically your point about Italian made stuff, I know a lot of bigger houses do also kind of profit off or attempt to profit off the made in Italy
Yeah,
tag that goes in the clothing, even though a lot of it is made in other countries and then kind of assembled in Italy or kind of finishing touches are put in Italy. So I wonder, are luxury brands going to have to kind of give up the ghost in a sense? Because although we, you know, if you study a lot of fashion or if you know about supply chain, you know that a lot of these brands aren't really, the stuff they're making isn't really that much better than some
it's not.
slightly, you know, contemporary brands that are making at the same factories. It's just you're paying for the branding and you're paying for the, you know, the social status. And so our brand's going to have to, if they are producing in China again because China is opening back up, are they going to have to, you know, make their stuff, label their stuff as made in China to, you know, abide by rules? And is that going to affect kind of how they present to customers? And, you know, because customers do have a negative association with made in China goods, even though
Yes,
it's not necessarily a bad thing. And even though we as consumers kind of create the cycle where we want cheap clothes, but the only place to make cheap clothes is in China. But when it's made in China, then
correct.
it's cheap. And so it, you know, what are people going to feel about made in China goods in future, especially with the xenophobic attacks that have been happening? Are people going to try and support made in China goods more, or it's a guessing game at this point, I think. Mhm.
So, what do you foresee
Mhm.
fashion how do you think fashion is going to respond to this pandemic? What do you think brands will be doing now to sort of stay relevant and
Mhm.
moving forward? How are they going to fix these issues that will come because of the damage to the supply chain across the board?
Yeah. So I think now is really a time, and I think this is where some people are tripping up, is not a time to try and keep up with what was the world before, quote unquote, and kind of try and reconfigure for what works for now and what's going to work for later. I think there's no use in trying to hold on to what was happening. I
Agreed.
think I've been reading a lot about the platform you mentioned, Jure, the digital showrooms.
Yeah.
I think that's really exciting. I know people have been using it, but to see it used more,
Yeah, I think like a lot
that'd be
of
cool.
brands, I'm familiar with Sure, I've used it in my professional
Mm,
life, and it is cool because brands don't have to be physically in front of their buyers to show them
hmm.
the collection. But unfortunately, a lot of garments and a lot of product doesn't necessarily translate
Yeah.
digitally. A lot of things you want to like touch it and feel it and like see whatever is happening
Hmm.
in real life in real time. So yeah, I think that's necessary.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't catch that last part, but it's okay. I think your thing you skipped out. Try and talk again.
Hello.
Yes, perfect. Okay, sorry, it skipped
Okay.
out.
I'm telling you guys, pandemic, things are happening.
um,
Talk to
so
me
yeah.
about
Mhm.
the Vogue global conversations that you were entrenched in and waking up
So
early to watch.
I
Honey.
I made it to the end of one because
Girl.
it was this thing, it was really hard. It was a thing started by Vogue, because Vogue is trying really hard to, I don't say stay relevant, but trying really hard to kind
Stay
of
relevant.
become more technologically um
Stay relevant.
available and accessible with the YouTube and the yeah, so they did a Zoom series. They did 4 days, and it was four different sessions with four different designers or brand or industry insiders each time. And so the one I watched the end of was with, specifically, the person I remember is Virgil Abloh, obviously, because I think he just has always been able to pivot really well, just from one thing to the next, and always keeping moving. And so one of the quotes he said, which refers to your previous question, is, if you're a new brand starting this period now, do what we as the established group cannot do, which is think free. Detach yourself from the idea of what you thought was the measure of success. So I think for people, for brands, big brands, or even independent brands who have the ability to kind of rethink, I think now is the perfect time
Now
to kind
is
of,
the time to do that.
yeah, because you have all this time. You don't have, I mean, you have responsibilities, but you don't have to be out and about doing things. You don't have,
Right.
so I
Agreed.
think,
I think
I hope people can, like Saint Laurent did, just make decisions that make sense for them, and not
agreed.
to fit into what was the fashion industry, because that's going to look different.
And take advantage of
um,
the technology that you have at your
exactly.
disposal, right? If you can go live, go live. You have
Exactly.
brands like Sandy Lang who are staying relevant by creating garments for Animal Crossing. You have
Exactly.
independent brands like Hanifa who is fully digitizing her fit
Yeah.
models and showing her new collection on a virtual model. Like I think there is space for you to be innovative now more than ever. And I think
Yeah.
that if you're a brand who wasn't direct to consumer before, honey,
Hmm.
forget opening ceremony, forget
Yeah,
Essence, not forget them, I
for
love them.
sure.
Forget Toto
Yeah.
Kayo, like forget these girls. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the big department stores that were placing huge orders for your brand
Yeah.
pre-COVID are not going to exist post-COVID.
Yeah.
So get in touch with your customer directly.
Hmm.
And if you can be vertically integrated as a company, meaning that you control every element of your supply chain,
Hmm.
you need to do that.
Yeah.
You need to do that.
And on the topic of technology, I mean, if you're like Paloma Wool was sending, I think had planned photo shoots, but instead they just had friends of the brand kind of do
Yes,
FaceTime photo shoots. And so to,
I
maybe
love a
it's,
FaceTime photo shoot.
yeah, maybe it's sending people stuff, and asking them to, user generated content has always been really important. And even now more than ever, when people are at home and need things to do, maybe where you can use technology. Most people have an iPhone, most people have FaceTime, whatever
Yeah.
it is.
I mean, Bella did her Vogue Italia spread
Exactly.
via FaceTime. So
Exactly.
take advantage of this time to innovate and push the
Hmm.
boundaries.
Yeah.
So let's close this out a bit with some brands that we're loving.
Cool.
I'm obviously, like I said, obsessed with Sandy Liang. The fact that she's putting I mean, before I was obsessed with her, but putting her fleece on
Insane.
little caricatures on Animal
Yeah.
Crossing, so smart,
Yeah.
insane, like obsessed.
Yeah.
Hanifa, if you're not familiar, she does a lot of cords and knits. She's a Black woman. I think she's based in Maryland, and she's just taking this time to really innovate this space, which I can always appreciate.
I think
Who else are we loving?
I mean Pyer Moss has always been a brand I've loved just because of their visuals, but I think Pyer Moss is another brand kind of setting an example by reaching back to the community and kind of I think they started a fund to help small businesses
Yeah, and I
at
think I saw
up to
Kirby like fully
$50,000.
getting masks that
Yeah,
to
exactly. And
first
changed the
responders.
studio into, I think, a donation center,
I
something
believe
along those
so.
lines. But I think to see people reaching back to the community and kind of helping younger voices, sometimes I think the best way to help your industry is to step away and let others into the industry. And so I think
100% to
that's a
say
really
that
good way
again,
of
because a
doing
lot
that.
of these girls been sitting in spaces that they should have been left and given
Yeah,
to younger
exactly. And given
kids
to
to
other
fill.
people.
Honey, like you're out of touch, baby.
Exactly.
Um, there is a dope South African designer by the name of Tebe Magugu. And don't drag me if that's not how you pronounce his name, but he showed recently in Paris, I believe, and his collection is stunning. He showed alongside some beautiful images based in South Africa, shot by South African photographers. So I'm obsessed with that African luxury space that's happening, and I think a lot of people need to be paying attention to Africa, just
Yeah.
as always.
Yeah.
Um, so where can folks find us? You can obviously find Brainwash at Brainwash X Media or brainwash.media if you want to read some of our written stories. We're on Twitter, Brainwash X Media. Don't find me because I don't know you. Hello. Akua, where can they find you?
My Instagram is just my name, AKUA Akua Kwakwa. Um,
Fire.
yeah, no, I always have to spell it out, but yeah, that's my Instagram. I'm also on Twitter.
Are
Yes,
you?
I'm on Twitter. I was like, yeah, I was like, do I want to tell people this? I am.
Do you? Do you have
I
problematic
think it's
tweets?
no, not problematic. No, I did check. Because right now is yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
facts.
So, Akua underscore Kwakwa, I believe. Yeah, it's more trash on there than like not trash, but
Yeah, my Twitter's
like
trash, so
nonsense, you know,
don't
like
find me. Just foolishness.
yeah, I'll decide if you can follow me or not. But yeah, I'm on Twitter and
Screaming.
Instagram.
So we'll include all the links to sources that we were discussing in the bio thing.
Yes.
And of course, links to our socials. And we're excited to start this journey with y'all.
Yeah.
All right, later. Bye.
All right. Cool.